What if the one truth you've spent your entire life defending is the very truth that shatters you the moment you finally confront it? What if the lie wasn't the rumor, but everything built to silence it? Picture this: a prince, raised under the harshest spotlight on earth, standing alone in a quiet room, clutching a sealed white envelope, his hands shaking, his breath uneven, his entire identity compressed into a few printed pages. And the question that haunted him from childhood, the whisper he tried to ignore, the joke that stung every time it resurfaced, finally demanding an answer. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Is King Charles truly his father? Or was the world right all along? You can almost hear the air shift in that moment. Because this wasn't just curiosity, wasn't just gossip, wasn't just tabloid noise. This was the kind of truth that cracks foundations. The kind that forces a man to look into a mirror and question not only where he comes from, but whether he's ever really belonged anywhere at all. And yet, even in his most private fears, Harry never expected this. Not this timing, not this pressure, not this result. The palace wasn't supposed to panic. Aides weren't supposed to rush into emergency meetings. Senior royals weren't supposed to whisper behind closed doors, tightening their circles, strategizing how to handle what one advisor allegedly described as the most destabilizing personal revelation in modern royal history. So why now? Why push the DNA test after decades of avoidance? Who demanded it? And what were they hoping, or terrified, to find? These are the questions that ignited the chain reaction. The questions that turned a long-running rumor into a crisis spiraling faster than anyone inside or outside the palace could control. But the real story, the story no one saw coming, begins not with the test itself, but with the moment Harry was told he must take it. Imagine the shock, the feeling of betrayal, the rising panic, the silent terror that maybe, just maybe, the rumor wasn't a rumor at all. Because when someone orders a DNA test, it's not because they trust the truth. It's because they doubt it. And that realization hit Harry harder than anything before. He wasn't being protected. He was being investigated. Let that sink in for a moment. The son of a king discovering that the monarchy he defended at unimaginable personal cost didn't fully believe he was who he said he was, who he always thought he was, who his mother raised him to be. But here's where it gets even more unsettling. The request for the test didn't come from one person. It didn't come from a quiet suggestion or a polite discussion. No, according to multiple whispered accounts, the decision was made in a room where Harry wasn't present, wasn't informed, and wasn't considered. A room where his fate was discussed like a PR problem. A room where his identity was treated like a liability. A room where the signature that authorized the test may not have been the one he expected. Why would someone do that? Why force a test he never asked for? Why now, after so many years of denial from every royal mouth involved? Something had changed. Something urgent. Something no longer manageable through silence. And Harry could feel it. He could feel the tension every time the rumor resurfaced online. He could feel the discomfort in interviews whenever his resemblance to James Hewitt was mentioned or denied too quickly. He could feel the public's fascination with the idea that he might not be Charles's son. But most of all, he could feel that this time, the palace wasn't ignoring the rumor. They were afraid of it. Ask yourself, what does a monarchy fear more, scandal or truth? Because one can be controlled, the other cannot. The deeper Harry looked, the more contradictions he found. Advisors claiming nothing was wrong, while scheduling secret calls. Family members insisting they supported him, while refusing to offer clear answers. Meghan urging transparency, while fearing the consequences. It was a swirling storm of mixed emotions: anger, confusion, dread, the desperate hope that the truth would finally put everything to rest. But hope is a fragile thing, especially when the truth is not what you imagined, but what you feared. And here is where the story takes its sharpest turn. This wasn't just about a rumor anymore. This wasn't just about proving Charles's paternity. This was about unraveling something larger, deeper, more dangerous. Because the moment the test was authorized, the palace's behavior shifted in ways Harry couldn't explain. Aides became nervous. Communications became restricted. And Harry, the man always accused of running from the royal family, suddenly realized the royal family might be running from him. Was it panic? Was it guilt? Was it the fear of losing control over a narrative that had held firm for decades? Or was it something else entirely? The truth is this. The DNA test wasn't meant to silence the rumor. It was meant to protect a secret tied not just to Harry's identity, but to Princess Diana's legacy, a secret that had been quietly guarded by those closest to her, a secret that now threatened to explode across the world, because someone unexpected, had known more than Harry realized. Someone who had left behind a clue, someone who had left behind a warning, someone who had once said, "The truth will out." And that someone was his mother. That's when the envelope arrived, sealed, unmarked, delivered quietly, discreetly, as if the contents inside carried enough weight to break a man in half. Harry stared at it for several minutes, unable to breathe, unable to move, unable to decide whether he wanted to know, or would rather live with uncertainty than face the truth head-on. Haven't you ever had a moment like that? A moment where the answer you seek might be the very answer that destroys you? Because knowledge is power, unless the truth isn't what you hoped it would be. Harry tore the seal. A single sheet slid out. Not the full report. Just one page. One summary line. One conclusion. And when he read it, when his eyes landed on the words he never imagined he'd see, his entire world tilted in an instant. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. He stared at that line, so long his vision blurred. The words didn't make sense at first. They couldn't. His mind rejected them even as his eyes reread them, again and again, hoping, praying, that somehow he had misunderstood. But the truth doesn't soften itself for comfort. It just sits there on the page, cold and absolute. Harry's hands trembled. The room felt smaller. His chest tightened as if the air itself had turned against him. Because the sentence he read didn't confirm King Charles as his father. It didn't reassure him. It didn't protect the story he'd defended with every breath, every interview, every public declaration. It contradicted it. And for a moment, he felt like the world had slipped out from underneath him. But here's the thing. That page wasn't the final result. It wasn't the whole story. It wasn't even the complete picture. It was just enough to plant doubt, enough to raise questions, enough to shake the walls of a monarchy built on inherited identity, inherited power, inherited truth. Imagine being in Harry's place right then. Imagine the rush of emotions, denial, anger, betrayal, confusion, sadness so sharp it felt physical. Imagine the years he spent insisting the rumor was false, only to be confronted with a document that whispered otherwise. But if the page was real, why was it incomplete? Why was it delivered separately? Why wasn't it sent through official channels? And why had no one, not Charles, not the palace, not even Meghan, warned him that an early summary might appear? Something was wrong, deeply wrong, because this wasn't how royal procedures were supposed to work. This wasn't how medical testing was usually handled. This wasn't how a family that claimed unity, loyalty, and support should behave. Harry folded the page carefully, as if mishandling it might somehow alter its devastating meaning. He stared out the window, watching clouds pass over the gray London sky, each one moving faster than the last, like time had sped up without his consent. He wanted answers. He wanted explanations. He wanted someone to tell him this was a misunderstanding. But silence echoed back at him. So he did the only thing he could. He called Meghan. Her voice on the other end was startled, then cautious, then intense. She could hear the strain. She could sense the shift. And before Harry even explained what had happened, she whispered the question he feared most. "Is it Charles?" Harry couldn't speak. His throat closed up. Because the truth wasn't clear. Not yet, but it wasn't pointing where he thought it would. Meghan asked again, her voice breaking. "Harry, is it Charles?" He finally whispered back, "I don't know." And that answer, that single admission, changed everything between them in that moment. Because Meghan had always encouraged Harry to confront the truth. She championed transparency, healing, honesty. But she also knew the consequences. She knew what it meant if the whispers of Hewitt being Harry's father weren't just idle gossip, but grounded in something far more real. For her, the stakes were enormous. For Harry, they were existential. Identity isn't just a name. It isn't just a bloodline. It isn't just a place on the royal family tree. Identity is belonging. Identity is history. Identity is home. And suddenly Harry wasn't sure he had any of those things. Meghan asked to see the page. He hesitated, not because he wanted to hide it, but because showing it meant acknowledging it. Once she read it, the truth wouldn't just be his burden. It would be theirs. Their marriage. Their children. Their future. He finally sent the photo. The silence on the line was immediate. Long. Heavy. Telling. Then Meghan spoke, but not the way he expected. Harry, this isn't the whole report. Her tone had shifted, from shock to something sharper, more analytical. Meghan was a strategist by nature, someone who could scan a situation and immediately detect inconsistencies. She didn't panic. She didn't cry. She didn't jump to conclusions. Instead, she said, something about this is wrong. Harry wanted to believe her, needed to believe her, because if this page was incomplete, or worse, manipulated, then there was still room for hope, or at least clarity. But even Meghan, for all her confidence, couldn't deny what the summary implied. And the summary implied a father who wasn't Charles, but someone else. Someone the world had speculated about for decades. Someone Diana had once been close to during one of the darkest periods of her marriage. Someone the tabloids never let Harry forget. James Hewitt. But here's the twist. The timeline didn't add up. It never had. Even Hewitt, in interviews, insisted he met Diana after Harry was born. So why did this page imply a connection anyway? Was the rumor true after all? Or was something else happening? Something orchestrated? Something manipulated? Something crafted to influence Harry's reaction before the real results were revealed? This wasn't just a question of biology anymore. It was a question of motive. Because someone wanted Harry rattled. Someone wanted him destabilized. Someone wanted him vulnerable before the truth came out in full. But who? And why? Harry's pulse quickened. Not from fear, but from realization. This single page wasn't a conclusion. It was a move. A play. A tactic. Someone was controlling the narrative before the truth was fully seen. And that meant the real story, the complete story, was still hidden. Waiting. Brewing. Preparing to drop like a hammer on a prince already pushed to emotional breaking. Harry placed the page back into the envelope and whispered the words no one ever expects to say. I think someone's manipulating this. But Meghan's reply hit even harder. Then who sent the real report? And that question, that single unanswered question, hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. Because the full DNA results had not yet arrived. But when they did, they would tear open the past, expose secrets buried for decades, and force Harry to confront a truth bigger than lineage, bigger than legacy, bigger than anything he had prepared for. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the truth you've spent your whole life defending suddenly turned around and pierced you like a blade? What if the rumor you dismissed, the joke you resented, the whisper that followed you everywhere wasn't just noise, but a signal, a warning? A truth wrapped in denial, wrapped in fear, wrapped in the fragile hope that some things, at least, were unshakable? Imagine waking up one morning and the world feels normal. The same sun, the same routine, the same assumptions about who you are and where you come from. And then, just a few hours later, everything shifts. Everything bends. Everything cracks. Because someone places a sealed white envelope in your hands. An envelope that quietly suggests your entire life may be built on a foundation that was never stable, never certain, never truly yours. That is the moment Prince Harry found himself in. Not on a battlefield. Not in an interview. Not in a press war with the tabloids. But alone. In a silent room. Holding the results of a DNA test he never wanted, never asked for, and never believed would uncover anything other than confirmation of what he always thought was true. King Charles is my father. He said it for years. He defended it fiercely. He repeated it with the confidence of a man who had no reason to question it. Until now. But let's rewind for a moment. Because this moment, the envelope, the shaking hands, didn't appear from nowhere. It was the result of pressure. Of palace whispers. Of rising fear inside institutional walls that thrive on image, control, and unbroken lineage. A pressure cooker quietly building until someone, and we still don't know exactly who, triggered the mechanism that changed everything. Why now? Why after decades of the same rumor swirling like a storm cloud that never fully burst? Why force Harry into a test he didn't volunteer for? These are not small questions. Because if you push someone into a truth, it means you're afraid of what happens if they never learn it. And the royal family, for all their power, all their authority, all their historical significance, still operate under one unspoken rule: protect the crown at any cost. But what happens when protecting the crown means breaking a prince? Harry could sense something was wrong long before the envelope arrived. There were meetings happening without him. Advisors who suddenly avoided eye contact. Calls that were shorter, sharper, more evasive. An urgency creeping into palace behavior that had nothing to do with public events or official duties. Then there was the signature, the authorization for the test. A signature that shouldn't have been where it was. A signature that raised more questions than it answered. A signature that suggested someone made a decision on Harry's behalf without his consent. Why? What were they afraid the test might confirm? Or more importantly, what were they afraid it might expose? And here is where the emotional weight hits hardest. Harry wasn't just dealing with a potential shift in lineage. He was dealing with the possibility that the monarchy never fully trusted his identity, that he grew up in a family that loved him, but maybe never felt entirely secure about him. Identity, after all, is the glue that holds a family together. When identity is questioned, everything becomes unstable. And Harry, standing in that room with that envelope, felt that instability seep into him like cold water. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if the paper inside might burst into flames. A single sheet, a single line, a conclusion that didn't match the version of his life he'd defended for years. He froze. His breath hitched. His stomach dropped. Not because the conclusion was final, it wasn't. Not because the science was complete. It wasn't. Not because the answer was definitive, it wasn't. But because the implication was unmistakable. The summary did not point to King Charles as his biological father. It didn't confirm James Hewitt either. It simply raised doubt. Dangerous doubt. Doubt strong enough to topple an institution built on bloodlines. Doubt sharp enough to shatter a man raised inside that institution. Harry stared at the page, his pulse pounding against his temples. How could this be real? How could something so foundational be questioned by a single sheet of paper? How could decades of identity be undone in 1 minute? He reached for his phone, called Meghan. She heard the tremor in his voice before he even spoke. Harry? What happened? Silence stretched. Are you okay? More silence. Finally, a whisper. No, I don't think I am. He sent her the photo of the page. Then waited. Her reaction wasn't what he expected. She didn't scream, didn't panic, didn't crumble. Meghan's mind went into analysis mode almost instantly. Harry, this isn't the complete report. He knew that, but hearing it said aloud felt like a lifeline. But the lifeline was thin, almost fragile, because even Meghan, for all her rationality, couldn't ignore what the summary suggested. It wasn't neutral. It wasn't reassuring. It wasn't the slam-dunk confirmation Harry had always expected. It suggested the possibility, the very possibility he had fought so hard against. That King Charles might not be his biological father. And if not Charles, then who? Only one name had haunted him his entire life. James Hewitt. A name tied to Diana's loneliness. A name tied to rumors she couldn't escape. A name tied to Harry's own face. The red hair, the shape of the jaw, details the public loved to compare, obsess over, weaponize. But timelines didn't add up. Even Hewitt said he met Diana after Harry was born. So why would this summary suggest otherwise? Unless the summary wasn't meant to reveal the truth, but to control the reaction. What if the incomplete report wasn't an accident, but a strategy? A move to soften the blow, or to heighten the blow, or to manipulate a prince before the full truth came out? Harry felt anger rise, bubbling under the grief. Why wasn't the full report sent? He asked Meghan. She answered quietly. Because someone didn't want you to see everything at once. And there it was. The unspoken truth. This wasn't just a test. This wasn't just about biology. This wasn't just about Harry's father. This was about control. The palace's behavior began to make sense in a chilling way. Meetings behind closed doors. Files transferred privately. Aides acting nervous. Information withheld. Silence from Charles himself. Someone knew more than Harry did. Someone anticipated what the results would reveal. Someone was preparing for impact while leaving him in the dark. That realization cut deeper than anything written on that page. It wasn't just the fear that Charles might not be his father. It was the fear that the palace already knew the truth and never told him. What kind of family hides that from a son? What kind of institution protects itself over a child? What kind of monarchy relies on secrecy so heavily that even the truth of a prince's birth must be handled like a political crisis? Harry folded the paper again, each crease harsher than the last. He felt betrayed. He felt manipulated. He felt like a pawn in a game he never agreed to play. But there was something even more unsettling. The envelope that arrived wasn't the official one. It wasn't from the medical office. It wasn't accompanied by verification or documentation. It was sent anonymously, and that meant someone inside the system, or close to it, wanted Harry to see this page before he saw the real results. Why? To warn him? To prepare him? To break him? Harry didn't know, but Meghan asked the question that pierced through the noise. If this isn't the official report, then where is the real one? And just like that, the ground beneath Harry shifted all over again. Because somewhere, the full DNA results existed. Somewhere, the truth, the whole truth, was sitting in another envelope. Somewhere, the answer to the rumor that haunted him for decades was waiting to be revealed. And when that envelope finally arrived, the truth inside it wouldn't just shake a prince. It would shake the monarchy. Because what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Why did one rumor haunt Prince Harry from the day he was born? Not many people can say they were born into a whisper. A persistent, prickling, echoing whisper. One that clung to every photograph, every newspaper column, every dinner party joke for decades. For Prince Harry, it was never just about being a royal. It was about being the royal, the one everyone speculated didn't quite fit, the one they said didn't match, the one who looked different. He was too young to understand the implications at first. The half-heard chuckles from photographers, the sharp silence that followed the name James Hewitt, the way grown adults would look at him, tilt their heads slightly, and then exchange glances like they were solving a riddle. It wasn't until Harry was older, maybe 9, maybe 10, that he began to realize something was off. The first time he ever heard the name directly, it was from a student at school. You're not even a real prince. Your dad's that army guy. Harry had no idea what it meant. But the word stuck. What do you do when the world starts questioning your blood? When total strangers decide to rewrite your story, armed with nothing but grainy photos and gossip? For most people, it would be slander. For Harry, it became a lifetime sentence. The whisper. Is Charles really his father? The implication. Was Diana faithful? The subtext. Is this red-haired boy even royal at all? It's a devastating narrative to attach to a child. Yet that's exactly what happened, again and again and again. From the moment Harry's hair turned a fiery shade of copper, unlike his brother's, unlike his father's, the comparison started. And not quietly. It was the topic of tabloid headlines, comedy sketches, whispering crowds, and anonymous internet posts long before social media made virality effortless. Even those who claimed to defend Harry often did it in ways that made things worse. He's nothing like Charles. That's what makes him interesting. Maybe Diana gave him her spirit, not just her looks. He's got the eyes of someone else, don't you think? But one name always surfaced. Always. James Hewitt. The British Army officer. The riding instructor. The man Diana, Princess of Wales, later admitted to having a 5-year affair with during the worst period of her marriage to Charles. It was supposed to be a secret, but secrets and royalty rarely coexist. By the mid-90s, the story was everywhere. Front pages, tell-all books, scathing exposés. Diana admitted it publicly. Hewitt did too. The world took that confession and did the math. Let's be clear, it never added up. Hewitt and Diana's affair is documented to have started in 1986, nearly 2 years after Harry's birth in September 1984. But logic never stood a chance against a good scandal. The resemblance was too convenient, the tension too juicy, the denials too defensive. And so the whisper lived on. Even when both Diana and Hewitt insisted Harry was born before they ever met, the rumor refused to die. Even when biographers published the family's calendar and timelines, the public wasn't satisfied. Why? Because for some, doubt is more entertaining than truth. And when that doubt is wrapped in royal drama, it becomes immortal. Harry was never given the benefit of the doubt. He was given a burden that became heavier with every adult year of his life. Because it didn't go away. Not when he joined the military. Not when he married Meghan. Not when he left the royal family. In fact, the moment Harry stepped back from his royal duties, the whispers became louder. Maybe he's stepping away because he doesn't belong. Maybe he was never a real Windsor. It was brutal, cruel, and personal in a way few can understand. Because it wasn't just gossip anymore, it was identity assassination. The kind that turns every achievement, every gesture, every sentence into something suspect. And here's the worst part. The louder Harry defended the truth, the more people seemed to doubt him. The psychology of royal scandal is twisted that way. Defending too hard looks like overcompensation. Ignoring it looks like silent guilt. Harry couldn't win, and neither could Charles, in some ways. Because the rumors didn't just target Harry, they targeted the monarchy's legitimacy. If the line of succession was compromised by infidelity, what did that mean for the institution? It was no longer just a family issue. It was a national one. And though King Charles has always publicly insisted that Harry is his son, that's silence on the deeper mechanics. The refusal to ever validate it through DNA created just enough ambiguity for conspiracy theorists to thrive. The royal family, after all, runs on tradition. And tradition often means silence, especially when the truth threatens the facade. But what happens when that silence becomes unbearable? What happens when a man, now a husband, a father, starts to wonder whether fighting a rumor only gives it power? What happens when the whisper becomes a roar, and the only way to silence it is with proof? It was Meghan, reportedly, who urged Harry to consider confronting it. Not because she believed the rumor, but because she believed in ending its power. Truth sets you free, she allegedly told him. But first, it'll hurt like hell. Harry wasn't ready. Not then. He didn't want to open old wounds. Didn't want to give the press another feast. Didn't want to stare into the possibility that the whisper had a sliver of truth. But 2025 changed everything. The whisper came back with renewed force, pushed by anonymous insiders, social media bots, even questionable palace sources, floating rumors that the royal family was tightening their circle. And in the midst of it, a leak. A quiet one. A line in a report no one was supposed to see. A whisper, now upgraded to a line of data. A whisper wearing a lab coat. Harry didn't ask for it, didn't authorize it, didn't expect it. But when the palace reportedly began consulting DNA specialists behind closed doors, allegedly to settle once and for all what they privately considered a breach of royal security optics, Harry knew the whisper wasn't going away. Because someone inside the system wanted this done. Not for Harry's peace, not for Diana's dignity, not for Charles's protection, but for the monarchy's survival. And so Harry found himself staring at a white envelope. No ceremony, no dramatic delivery, just a document slipped through the cracks. A summary line, a quiet blow. The DNA results were not yet complete, but what he read implied something he had never prepared to accept, that the whisper may not have been a lie. And as that whisper became a scream inside his head, Harry knew there was no turning back. Because if the final results confirmed it, if James Hewitt truly was his biological father, then not only would his identity collapse, so would the monarchy's most uncomfortable secret. But someone else already knew. Someone who had left behind a clue, a letter, a message from the past. And what it revealed would upend everything Harry thought he knew about his mother, about his father, and about the man who'd been watching silently from the shadows for over 30 years. Because this wasn't the end of the whisper. It was the beginning of a truth far more dangerous. And what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Who forced the test to happen? Because let's be clear, Prince Harry didn't wake up one day, sip his tea, and decide to unravel the deepest, most damaging rumor about his own bloodline. He didn't schedule a DNA test with a smile. He didn't want to pick at this scab. He wanted to live. He wanted to move on. He wanted the whisper to fade into background noise. But someone inside the royal system didn't agree. Someone, or some group, decided that this thing, this ancestral powder keg, had reached its expiration date, that it was no longer manageable as rumor, and that silence was now more dangerous than truth. So they did what royals always do when something threatens the crown. They called a meeting, not a press conference, not a Zoom call, not a family chat, a real meeting, in person, private, urgent, inside Clarence House. Now, if you don't know, Clarence House is no ordinary royal building. It's not a tourist-friendly castle or a ceremonial hall. It is the beating heart of Charles's former court, his headquarters for decades before becoming king. A place thick with tradition, loyalty, and strategy. It's where political calculations meet family drama, where tea is served alongside betrayal, where what's unsaid carries far more weight than what's ever spoken aloud. And that's where it happened, behind velvet drapes, between whispers and glances, a gathering of key players, all allegedly brought together under one shared objective: force Prince Harry into a DNA test. Why? Why now? And more chillingly, why without him? According to palace sources who've since gone uncomfortably quiet, the guest list for this meeting was precise, tight, strategic: high-level advisors, medical liaisons, legal counsel, 2 senior members of the firm. No William, no Harry, no Charles. Let that sink in. A meeting about Harry's paternity. And not one biological principle in the room. Because this wasn't about resolution. It was about containment. Someone had gotten spooked. There had been movement in the press. New rumors circulating on encrypted telegram groups. Whispers from unnamed former staffers, hinting at long-buried letters Diana may have written before her death. One tabloid, in particular, was reportedly preparing a brutal exposé, complete with doctored photos, pseudo-expert analysis, and a fake insider leak. It was coming. A new wave. Louder. More vicious. Less dismissible. And the palace couldn't afford that. Not with Charles's reign already under intense scrutiny. Not with Harry's memoir having ripped the veil off so many guarded secrets. Not with Meghan's popularity rising in Hollywood again. Not with the king's health allegedly under careful monitoring behind the scenes. The monarchy was, whether they'd admit it or not, in a fragile phase. So this meeting wasn't a discussion. It was a directive. From whom? Some say it came from Camilla. Others point fingers at the men in gray, the legendary, faceless bureaucrats of the palace who pull strings without ever showing their hands. Some even whisper that William's team pushed it, not as an act of cruelty, but to end the speculation once and for all, regardless of where the chips fell. But one name kept coming up in hushed corners. Sir Edward Langston, longtime royal legal advisor, a ghost in the system. Always present, never photographed. The man who supposedly handled every document too sensitive for public archives. Sir Edward allegedly chaired the Clarence House meeting. And according to one insider, he opened with a sentence that sent a chill through the room. We must know the truth before the press does. Think about that. Not, we must help Harry. Not, we owe it to the family. Not, we should protect Diana's legacy. But, before the press does. The stakes weren't emotional. They were strategic. This was crisis management dressed up as compassion. And yet, here's where it gets murky. At some point during the meeting, a plan was proposed. An outside lab, discreet, reputable, but unaffiliated with the NHS or Royal Medical Services, would be contracted for the analysis. Samples would be taken covertly. Authorization would be obtained by proxy. And the results would be delivered to the palace first, not to Harry. Wrap your head around that. A test about his own identity, to be delivered to people who may not even want him to see it. It was control. Total, clinical control. And that's when someone, reportedly a junior aide, perhaps naively, asked the one question no one else dared to voice aloud. What if the results aren't what we want? The silence in the room, they say, was thunderous. Because the truth, if it confirmed James Hewitt as Harry's biological father, would be a constitutional earthquake. Not for succession, since Harry was never first in line, but for perception, for tradition, for stability, and worst of all, for Charles. What would it mean for the king if it turned out he had raised another man's child? Unknowingly, or worse, knowingly. What would it do to his image? To the image of Diana? To the carefully curated mythology of the people's princess and her 2 golden sons? One advisor reportedly suggested suppressing the results entirely, regardless of the outcome. Just as a contingency. Another raised legal barriers. How to prevent press leaks. How to issue denials without lying. How to frame uncertainty as privacy. But the group settled on one key move. Control the test. Control the narrative. Control the prince. And that's when it happened. A document was produced. A form. An authorization. With a signature already attached. Not Harry's. Not Charles's. But someone with just enough authority to make the request seem legitimate. The palace has never confirmed who signed it. But insiders suggest it may have been an older document. A recycled form from years ago. Repurposed. Reused. Forged. No one will say. But the test was greenlit. Without Harry's knowledge. Without his consent. Without even the courtesy of a warning. The meeting adjourned with tea and tight smiles. And just like that, the plan was in motion. But here's the twist. Someone in that meeting disagreed. Someone who believed Harry had a right to know. And that someone, we're told, sent a quiet message. An unmarked envelope. A partial summary. A warning, not an answer. The same envelope Harry opened weeks later. The one that shook him. The one that left him staring into space, wondering who he really was, and who might have been lying to him all along. Because the secret meeting at Clarence's house wasn't just about finding the truth. It was about owning it. But what the palace didn't anticipate was that someone outside the system was watching. And what that person did next would detonate the entire operation from within. Because buried in a forgotten folder inside a locked royal archive was a letter Diana wrote in 1996. And what she wrote in that letter would make the DNA test irrelevant. Because it contained a different kind of truth. A mother's truth. And it would change everything. What if the person you love most suddenly doesn't know who they are anymore? That was the question lingering in the air the moment Meghan Markle picked up the phone. She wasn't on a red carpet. She wasn't at an Archwell shoot. She wasn't preparing a press statement. She was at home, barefaced, tired, sorting through storyboards for a new lifestyle project when her phone buzzed with a vibration she immediately recognized as him. Harry. And something in her gut, the tightening of the chest, the silence between rings, told her this was not just another husband checking in. She answered. Harry. Silence. Too long. Then his voice. I got something. She sat up. What do you mean? It arrived. An envelope. With something inside. Not from the lab. Not official. But it's about the test. And then, nothing. For nearly 12 seconds. Which in the world of Meghan and Harry meant everything. Because Harry wasn't a man of long silences. He talked things through. Even pain. Even anger. Especially uncertainty. So when he didn't speak, Meghan knew it was bad. Harry, what did it say? Another pause. And then, it doesn't say Charles is my father. Just like that. The room around her blurred. She dropped the pencil she was holding. Stared at the floor. Her mind flooded with 1,000 thoughts all at once. What does this mean? Is it even real? Is someone messing with him? Is this a setup? What if it's true? Wait, she said breathlessly. Where did this come from? No return address. No stamp. Just slid through the door. That's impossible. Security would have stopped it. I know. But it was here. On the floor. I opened it. What did it say exactly? Just a line. A conclusion. A percentage. No name. Was James Hewitt mentioned? No. But Charles wasn't confirmed. No. For Meghan, the implications landed like glass shattering inside her chest. Because this wasn't just about a man questioning his bloodline. This was about everything they'd built. Their entire brand. Their identity. Their rebellion. Their escape. Because Meghan and Harry's departure from royal life. Their Netflix deals, their speaking tours, their memoirs, their Archwell vision, was built on a foundation of pain, yes, but also of pedigree. Harry had always maintained that despite everything, he was still the son of a king. He had walked behind Diana's coffin. He had grown up under Charles's wing. He had the bloodline, even if he had rejected the crown. But what happens when the bloodline isn't real? What happens when even your identity, your literal genetic history, becomes a PR crisis? Meghan felt the room spin. She'd dealt with scandal before. Smear campaigns, tabloid assaults, racist headlines. But this was internal. This was Harry's soul. This was his origin. And she wasn't ready. Yet somehow, the strategist in her activated. She pushed aside emotion, for a moment. Focused on the details. Where's the envelope? Right here. Send me a photo. Now. He did. She opened it. Zoomed in. Analyzed. Harry, this isn't official. This isn't even formatted properly. I know. There's no seal, no issuing lab name, no barcodes. I know. This could be fake. But what if it's not? That sentence stopped her cold. Because in her heart, she knew he wasn't just spiraling. Harry wasn't paranoid. He was grieving something that hadn't even been confirmed yet. And that's what made it real. Because grief doesn't wait for confirmation. It begins the moment trust breaks. And Harry was grieving his identity. Or at least the version of it he had fought so hard to protect. She closed her eyes. Imagine their son, Archie. Imagine the questions he might one day ask. Who was Grandpa Charles? Why do they say you're not royal anymore? Why do they call you exiled? And worse, is he really your dad? Meghan opened her eyes. Focused. This doesn't add up, she said. There's no reason this should have arrived the way it did. Someone wanted you to see this before the real results. You think it's manipulation? I think it's damage control. Or psychological warfare. Someone wants you unstable. Then it's working. Her heart cracked. But she didn't say I'm sorry. She didn't say we'll figure it out. She asked a sharper question. Have you spoken to Charles? No. I can't. Not until I know more. Have you told William? I don't even know if I'm ready to tell myself. The pain in his voice was a knife. Because if it wasn't Charles, then who? Meghan, for the first time, said it aloud. Do you think it could be Hewitt? Silence. Then, I don't know. 3 words. That changed everything. Because for the first time in his life, Harry didn't say no. Didn't scoff. Didn't rage. Didn't deflect. He said, I don't know. And Meghan heard the crack form. Not just in his voice. In their foundation. This wasn't just Harry's journey now. It was theirs. As a couple. As a family. As parents of children who may grow up carrying a name that didn't come from the lineage they thought it did. That night, Meghan sat in her study. Alone. Staring at the photo of the DNA summary. Then she opened her laptop and typed a name into the search bar. James Hewitt. Dozens of images appeared. Most she had seen before. Some she hadn't. She zoomed in on one from the late 80s. Young Hewitt in uniform. Red hair. Sharp chin. Sun-wrinkled eyes. She paused. Then opened a picture of Harry in uniform. Side by side. She zoomed in. Side by side. She blinked. Side by side. Then she closed the screen and whispered, almost to herself, oh my God. Because for a moment, just a moment, she saw something she couldn't unsee. And it wasn't speculation anymore. It was resemblance. Not proof. Not certainty. But possibility. And that's when she decided. They had to get the full report. Not from the palace. Not from a royal lab. Not from someone else's pipeline. But from their source. Independent. Verified. Private. Because if the monarchy was playing games, if the firm was trying to rig the emotional chessboard, then Meghan would do what she had always done. Take back control. And expose the truth before they could bury it. She stood up. Walked to the bedroom. Harry was sitting in the dark. She sat beside him. Took his hand. And said just 3 words. Let's find out. But what neither of them knew was that while they were preparing to uncover the truth, someone else was already leaking it. And the world was about to find out before they did. What if the signature that opened Pandora's box wasn't his? That was the question that clawed at Harry's mind as he stood over his desk, staring at the copied DNA summary. Not because of what it said, that was enough, but because of how it got there. Someone had requested this test. Someone had signed off on it. And Harry was sure of one thing. It wasn't him. He never signed anything. No request form. No consent document. No authorization. Nothing. So why was there a test? And who made it official? The entire monarchy runs on paper. Controlled paper. Authorizations, advisories, sign-offs, vetting, red tape thick enough to choke a whale. Nothing gets tested, nothing gets verified, nothing moves through the royal machinery without a signature. So someone forged it. Or someone presumed permission. Which one was worse? Harry didn't know yet. But one thing gnawed at him harder than the rest. Someone decided his blood didn't belong to him. It belonged to the institution. And that someone had left a paper trail. Meghan's face tightened as she scrolled through encrypted documents one of her private legal contacts had obtained, discreetly, through a source in the administrative underbelly of the royal offices. One file in particular chilled her. It was a scanned authorization form. It had Harry's name, his birth date, his military ID, and a digital stamp of approval. But when they zoomed in on the signature, everything shattered. It was familiar, but it wasn't Harry's. The slant was wrong. The looped H wasn't his style. And most telling of all, the handwriting had been used before, on a different form, from a different era. A royal aide's signature used during Charles's emergency appendectomy in 2013. They knew this because Meghan, in her fury-fueled obsession, had once built a private digital archive of every document ever leaked or posted online relating to royal affairs. From routine appointments to shady expenses to legal filings. A hobby? No. A weapon. A library of receipts for when the day would come. That day had come. She ran a scan on the signature. It matched a name. Sir Jasper Rylott. A man long retired. A former private secretary to Charles. A ghost in the system. Last seen publicly in 2019 at a private gala, and never heard from again. Why would a man who hadn't been employed by the palace in over 5 years be signing off on a DNA test today? He wouldn't. He didn't. Which meant one thing. They used his old signature as a proxy. A workaround. A fallback identity to file a test Harry never authorized, so that it could appear internally approved if questions ever surfaced. And this discovery? This one-page digital forgery? It changed everything. Harry stared at it. Someone used bureaucracy as a weapon. Someone had slipped in a forged approval through an outdated system of quiet servants and untraceable emails to greenlight a test that shouldn't have existed. Whoever it was, they knew the system well. They knew which ghosts were dead enough to not raise suspicion, but alive enough to still technically exist in the royal filing system. Meghan stepped back from the screen. This was planned. Harry swallowed. By who? I think it's deeper than just Clarence House, she said. This feels like committee level. Now that word, committee, it meant something in the palace. It didn't mean parliament. Didn't mean public. It meant the internal circle of courtiers and senior aides who answer to no one, not even the monarch. The ones who keep the family safe, the secrets buried, and the wheels spinning quietly behind the curtain. Unofficial, but powerful. They are the ones who approve emergency holidays to Balmoral when scandal hits. They are the ones who reframe narratives before the press gets wind. They are the ones who bury affairs, silence staff, and manage succession optics. And now, allegedly, they were the ones who had authorized a DNA test for a prince without his knowledge. Harry felt his stomach turn. This wasn't just betrayal. This was an operation. And suddenly, everything else started to make sense. The missing documents. The unmarked envelope. The partial summary. The silence from Charles. The ghost's signature. All of it pointed to one inescapable truth. The monarchy had known. Maybe not Charles personally, but the machine around him. The firm. The palace. The office. And they didn't just suspect. They tested. They checked. They moved. Behind his back. With his name. With his blood. With his identity. And if they had done that, what else had they done? Meghan's phone buzzed again. A new email. Subject line. From JR. An anonymous drop. Encrypted. Anonymous burner address. Inside. A voice note. Fuzzy. Filtered. But familiar. We cannot afford this to come out as a surprise. Best to own it quietly. He's emotionally volatile. But he'll recover. It's a blood test, not a firing squad. Harry's eyes widened. He knew the voice. Sir Edward Langston. The same man who reportedly chaired the Clarence House meeting. The royal legal mind. The iron wall of discretion. And now, the man who allegedly helped fake the signature. There was no doubt. He was involved. The leak was clear. They had done it. They had weaponized a test Harry didn't authorize. They had delivered partial results. They had decided what he would see. And when. And if it weren't for a whistleblower on the inside, Harry might never have known. Meghan, he whispered, voice flat. They've lied to me since birth. And Meghan said nothing. Because what could she say? This wasn't just about a forged signature. It was about a lifetime of secrets. About the machinery that decided truth was optional. And about a man who might not be the son of the king, but the son of someone the monarchy had spent decades trying to erase. Harry's voice broke as he stared at the signature. This isn't just betrayal. No, Meghan said softly. It's erasure. But what neither of them knew was that Charles himself had never seen the report either. Because someone intercepted it. And the king was about to confront the one advisor who'd been lying to them both. What if the one thing that disproved everything was a lie itself? That's what Harry kept circling back to as the clock ticked past midnight, and the questions refused to sleep. For years, the single shield he used to deflect the storm of paternity rumors was a simple one: the timeline. James Hewitt didn't meet Princess Diana until after Harry was born. That was fact. Documented. Stated repeatedly. End of story. But now that the DNA summary cast a long shadow over that assumption, Harry was no longer sure of anything. Because if the palace had forged a signature to test his DNA without his permission, what else had they manipulated? What if the timeline itself, the one everyone clung to for protection, was never accurate to begin with. That was the question that Meghan dared to ask the night after the fake authorization form came to light. What if they lied about when Diana and Hewitt met? Harry's face went pale. Because if that was true, if that detail, the one that had kept the wolves at bay for decades, turned out to be misinformation, then he might have been wrong all along. Not just about who he was, but about how deeply the palace had buried the truth. So they began to investigate. Quietly, carefully, privately. Meghan reached out to a journalist contact, not from the tabloids, but a trusted documentary researcher who'd once worked on a shelved Netflix royal series. She asked for every verifiable record, diary, letter, and published timeline referencing Diana's interactions with Hewitt, and what they received back, just 48 hours later, was chilling. There were discrepancies, subtle ones, but enough. According to Diana's televised interview with Martin Bashir in 1995, she stated that she met Hewitt when I was at my lowest, around 1986. That year became gospel. Every news outlet printed it. Every biographer cited it. But what they hadn't known, or hadn't looked at closely, were the travel logs. In 1983, Diana reportedly attended a charity polo event in Devon. So did Hewitt, and the guest list included both their names. At the time, it was considered irrelevant, just another royal outing. No photos emerged of the two of them together, but the records existed. And more disturbing still, in Hewitt's own ghost-ridden memoir, there was a line that had gone unnoticed for decades. She was radiant, a blur of elegance at that spring luncheon. I never thought I'd speak to her again after that fleeting smile. Spring luncheon, Devon, 1983. Meghan blinked. Harry froze. If Hewitt had seen Diana in 1983, that was before Harry was born. Still, one meeting doesn't imply a relationship, right? That's what they told themselves. Until the second bombshell arrived. A former royal protection officer, speaking under anonymity, had written an unpublished manuscript shortly before his death in 2007. In it, he casually mentioned, there were whispers from the staff about the horseman from Devon showing up earlier than he should have. But Her Royal Highness said he was just giving advice on stables, and the matter was dropped. No year, no specifics, but in the handwritten margin beside the printed paragraph, likely added during the draft stage, there was a note in red ink. Re. 84. Don't use this part yet. Could cause trouble. Meghan read that line aloud, then looked at Harry. That's the year you were born. Harry's hands trembled. This wasn't a conspiracy theory anymore. It was documented doubt. Not confirmation. Not proof. But smoke. And where there's smoke, they turned next to Diana's old letters. Many had been auctioned off over the years, purchased by collectors, private donors, or stored in legal archives. Meghan contacted a law firm she'd previously worked with during her lawsuit against the Mail on Sunday. They had access to the original scans of letters Diana wrote between 1982 and 1985, mostly to friends, charities, and family. And there it was. In a short letter from March 1984, Diana wrote, feeling utterly cornered by the firm. Even my walks feel staged now. I found a friend who listens. JH, kind, calm, a proper escape from all of this. March 1984. 6 months before Harry's birth, Harry slumped in his chair, his heart pounding, because in every public statement, every timeline, every carefully curated biography, Diana's relationship with Hewitt was placed safely after Harry's birth. Now, that line was crumbling, and if it crumbled, so did his last line of defense. Meghan reached for his hand. Harry, I don't think it's just gossip anymore. He didn't respond, because deep down, he already knew. It was in his bones. In the way the family treated him differently. In the jokes, the subtle cold shoulders. In the way he was praised for being different from William, but never too different, not publicly. He'd always felt it. Now it had shape. And then came the final blow. A former palace chef, now retired in Scotland, posted something cryptic on a private forum. Someone screen-capped it and sent it to a royal gossip account, which then forwarded it to Meghan via encrypted DM. The message read, "We all knew. You don't make as many ginger jokes at a royal table without reason. Even the Queen once called him the little cavalry surprise. We just kept cooking." Harry stared at the screen. The little cavalry surprise. His stomach twisted. The implication was unmistakable. James Hewitt, cavalry officer. Surprise, a child. Red hair, not from Charles. He walked to the window, stared out, didn't say anything, because this wasn't about whether Hewitt was his father anymore. It was about the people who knew and said nothing. The staff who joked, the advisors who whispered, the institutions that chose silence over truth. Meghan finally asked the question aloud. Do you want to meet him? Harry turned. Who? You know who. He hesitated. Did he? Did he want to? Would it bring peace? Or rupture? But before he could answer, his phone rang. Unknown number. Meghan narrowed her eyes. Harry answered. A gravelly voice crackled through the speaker. Henry. I've seen the reports. I think it's time we talk. Harry froze. He knew the voice. He'd heard it once, years ago, after Diana's death. A letter left for him. A recorded message from a man he was told to never meet. James. Hewitt. And now? He was calling. Because he had seen the firestorm. And he had something to say? What if the truth you've spent your whole life defending suddenly turned around and pierced you like a blade? What if the rumor you dismissed, the joke you resented, the whisper that followed you everywhere wasn't just noise, but a signal? A warning? A truth wrapped in denial, wrapped in fear, wrapped in the fragile hope that some things, at least, were unshakable? Imagine waking up one morning and the world feels normal. The same sun, the same routine, the same assumptions about who you are and where you come from. And then, just a few hours later, everything shifts. Everything bends. Everything cracks. Because someone places a sealed white envelope in your hands. An envelope that quietly suggests your entire life may be built on a foundation that was never stable, never certain, never truly yours. That is the moment Prince Harry found himself in. Not on a battlefield. Not in an interview. Not in a press war with the tabloids. But alone. In a silent room, holding the results of a DNA test he never wanted, never asked for, and never believed would uncover anything other than confirmation of what he always thought was true. King Charles is my father. He said it for years. He defended it fiercely. He repeated it with the confidence of a man who had no reason to question it. Until now. But let's rewind for a moment. Because this moment, the envelope, the shaking hands, didn't appear from nowhere. It was the result of pressure. Of palace whispers, of rising fear inside institutional walls that thrive on image, control, and unbroken lineage. A pressure cooker quietly building until someone, and we still don't know exactly who, triggered the mechanism that changed everything. Why now? Why after decades of the same rumor swirling like a storm cloud that never fully burst? Why force Harry into a test he didn't volunteer for? These are not small questions. Because if you push someone into a truth, it means you're afraid of what happens if they never learn it. And the royal family, for all their power, all their authority, all their historical significance, still operate under one unspoken rule. Protect the crown at any cost. But what happens when protecting the crown means breaking a prince? Harry could sense something was wrong long before the envelope arrived. There were meetings happening without him. Advisors who suddenly avoided eye contact. Calls that were shorter, sharper, more evasive. An urgency creeping into palace behavior that had nothing to do with public events or official duties. Then there was the signature, the authorization for the test. A signature that shouldn't have been where it was. A signature that raised more questions than it answered. A signature that suggested someone made a decision on Harry's behalf without his consent. Why? What were they afraid the test might confirm? Or more importantly, what were they afraid it might expose? And here is where the emotional weight hits hardest. Harry wasn't just dealing with a potential shift in lineage. He was dealing with the possibility that the monarchy never fully trusted his identity. That he grew up in a family that loved him, but maybe never felt entirely secure about him. Identity, after all, is the glue that holds a family together. When identity is questioned, everything becomes unstable. And Harry, standing in that room with that envelope, felt that instability seep into him like cold water. He opened it slowly, carefully, as if the paper inside might burst into flames. A single sheet, a single line, a conclusion that didn't match the version of his life he'd defended for years. He froze. His breath hitched. His stomach dropped. Not because the conclusion was final, it wasn't. Not because the science was complete. It wasn't. Not because the answer was definitive, it wasn't. But because the implication was unmistakable. The summary did not point to King Charles as his biological father. It didn't confirm James Hewitt either. It simply raised doubt. Dangerous doubt. Doubt strong enough to topple an institution built on bloodlines. Doubt sharp enough to shatter a man raised inside that institution. Harry stared at the page, his pulse pounding against his temples. How could this be real? How could something so foundational be questioned by a single sheet of paper? How could decades of identity be undone in 1 minute? He reached for his phone, called Megan. She heard the tremor in his voice before he even spoke. Harry? What happened? Silence stretched. Are you okay? More silence. Finally, a whisper. No, I don't think I am. He sent her the photo of the page, then waited. Her reaction wasn't what he expected. She didn't scream, didn't panic, didn't crumble. Megan's mind went into analysis mode almost instantly. Harry, this isn't the complete report. He knew that, but hearing it said aloud felt like a lifeline. But the lifeline was thin, almost fragile, because even Megan, for all her rationality, couldn't ignore what the summary suggested. It wasn't neutral. It wasn't reassuring. It wasn't the slam-dunk confirmation Harry had always expected. It suggested the possibility, the very possibility.